Hi everyone, it's Margot at My Favorite Quilt Store, and I wanted to give you an overview and some ideas on the first installment of the solar flare. The first thing we're going to do is do the center 4 blocks. So we've only got to complete 4 blocks for this particular round. And so I wanted to give you some tips and tricks. So I started this at retreat last week, and I'm telling you, I had some problems because it was this paper is very, very stiff to work with, and I'm used to a more thin, lightweight paper when I'm paper piecing, and so it was a little difficult to work with. But I've gotten some things that have helped out tremendously from the first round of making this quilt. So we're going to get to that in 1 second. First of all, when you pull out your pattern, you're going to see that you have this. And then was also one mistake in the lettering of the fabric. So you should also have a corrected copy of what the lettering is. And what has happened is in that you're using in block 1 was numbered wrong. And it should be, I'm sorry, T was numbered wrong. It was in the original as, I marked through it so hard I can't see. The wrong, so T, which is this one, has changed, and this one has changed. They flipped sides. This one is used in block 1. This one is not used in block 1. So this one is now called T, and in the directions it was called R. And so T and R were actually flipped in the directions, and so you just need to make sure you have a corrected copy. If you do not, please let us know. We'd be happy to send you a copy of this so that you have the right fabrics in the right place. But if you keep an eye on the picture of what we're doing, which is this center area, you should be able to get the right fabrics by just looking at this really, really close. So that was the first thing I wanted to let you know, is that I had all this out and I was looking at it, and then eventually this fell out and I was like, oh, I gotta change those fabrics. So I first pulled out the 4 fabrics that I'm gonna use. And in this is fabric 1, or it's X, B is in the middle, and T is this one. And then this is fabric N, Z, and C. So I've got them all over here in the order that I'm going to use them. So the first thing I did was I took my paper that I'm going to use for my block 1, wrote block 1 on it so I know which one it is, and then I put the corresponding letters of each color that I'm using into each section so that I could match them almost completely with the fabric number. Then what I did was I cut my strips. I did not cut the secondary cut on them. I kept them in strips, and I put in the salvage the letter of the fabric. This one would have been T, so the T would have been in the salvage of this. I've got a close-up picture here. You can see this one has the C on it right there. So I have the C on this one's because that's color C. So I have them in order, but I've also got the corresponding letter in the salvage, on the white salvage of each of the strips, so that in case I get them out of order or wonder which one I'm using, I will always know. And I start from the salvage that is not white and work down to the white side so that I still have the letter of the fabric on the salvage that I'm using and can refer back to. So that's what I like to do when I'm paper piecing and have a lot of different colors. I also only get out the 6 colors that I needed for this block. So only the colors I'm working with that I get out and cut at this point in time. Everything else is still in the package, waiting to be cut for when I need the fabric. So I got the other 4 blocks, the other 3 blocks sewn up, and I wanted to give you some tips on this one. So the first thing I did was after I cut the fabric, is that I took this paper after I lettered it, and I used the straight edge of my ruler and folded this on the line to give it just some more flexibility, because when you go to cut this, you're going to need to fold it back and on the line, and then trim to a quarter inch. And so I wanted to have this paper already somewhat flexible before I started sewing in it. So I went through and creased all of this paper first on the line so that I had every single line kind of somewhat creased in here that I was going to need to fold at a later date. And this gave me a lot more flexibility in the paper. The other thing when I first started is I did not iron the fabric. And normally I can finger press, and then with a lighter weight paper, I can just scooch it to make sure it's in place and pin it. But with this heavyweight paper, I was unable to do that. And so the first 3 times that I sewed, I finger pressed and then cut it and put the next piece on. I had to go back and take all that out because I had too much fabric in the seam. Like there was a tuck right there. And when you go to quilt that, you're gonna have a ridge in your quilt if you don't get it flat. So after each time that I'm sewing, I am going back and pressing right then and getting it very, very flat and in place before I come and trim it so that I have a nice flat seam that I'm working against. Matt, I didn't bring pins, so would you hand me those pins over there? I forgot to bring them to the sewing table. Thank you very much. So I am gonna need some pins in this because I will need to hold the fabric in place when I'm starting. So what I found was the most difficult was the first block to get done. So 1 and 7 are the exact same fabrics. As you can see, this is 1 and this is 7. They actually have it pieced as 2 different pieces, and I had already cut my fabric, so I needed to do that also. But I tell you, if I hadn't cut my fabric at all, what I would do next time is use 1 4-inch piece on this, or the 4.5-inch piece on this one center section, because this gives your eye the full linear piece and it matches up. What I'm not 100% pleased with is that I worked hard to try and maybe match this up on these seams right here, but I never got it to be, that one was probably the most perfect. This one was not very good, and this one either. It's very difficult to match and get this kind of where it looks like it all goes together. In the picture, it's not that they have done that, but for me personally, I would rather it be one solid piece and it match and it carry the eye all the way through than 2 pieces that are kind of halfway matched or mismatched. So anyway, that's what I would do differently next time if I had not cut my fabric and started. I didn't think about it until like the second block when I had this piece out. And I was looking at it and I said, oh, that would have just absolutely been perfect had I done it that way. But I did not. So the other thing is that they have these numbered 1 through 6 and 7 through 12. So they wanted you to work this way first and this way second. I found it much easier to work from the inside out, going on both sides at the same time, so that this would be my first seam of the whole block. So when I do it, I'm going to show you that. So what we need to do is put our right sides of our fabric together so that we have right sides facing one another. I'm going to line this up to where they are right sides facing together. Crease this on this line because I want to make sure that I get the sewing line at least 1/4 inch away from the edge of the and cover the entire block, which I have got right here. So you can see I've got at least 1/4 inch seam right here all the way down. So what I'm going to do is open this up, and this is where I need a little bit of pinning to come into place. Now on the first block, when I was pinning, I pinned straight up and down. And I have to say, I caught my finger a number of times in doing that. So this time I'm being very careful where I'm pinning. I'm pinning not as I'm sewing up and down. I'm pinning to the side, and as I get to the pin, I will remove it. So I will double check again that I've got the fabric in the right position, and I do. And I'm going to sew this seam down. Now I have, this paper is very thick, so that is one of the things that that is going to make it a little more difficult to tear off. So I have really made sure that I've got made my stitch length very small. I've got it at 1.5. So the only thing that might do is if I make a mistake, would make it a little harder to rip out the seam and take it apart if I have a problem. But I've also had to rip out a number of seams already, and I know that the paper holds up pretty well, and I've got my removable tape to keep the paper together as I get through. So I'm coming up and I'm removing the pin as I get to that spot to where I've pinned it so that it stays in place. I've got both hands on this piece. And like I said, I'm starting from a little bit different starting point than what the directions possibly say, because I found this to be easier as I was sewing the first few blocks together. I did it their way the first time and then decided there was an easier way to do this as I went along. So what you want to do is continue down into block 13 here at the bottom, a little more than a 1/4 of an inch, because I'm going to trim that up and I'm going to pull the paper away. So I'm fine with making it a little further away. If you pull your thread up, it'll pop that bobbin thread up and it'll cut both threads at the same time, and you'll have a perfect seam. So this is right at a 1/4 inch. I can actually come over here, put my 1/4 inch seam ruler down and see that I do. If I need to trim it, I do not. I'm good on all parts there. So what I'm going to do is open this up and I'm going to iron it flat first. So this fabric and this paper is very difficult to work with if you do not iron this flat as you progress through your making these blocks. So you want to iron it just as flat as you can and press towards the seam so that you make sure that you don't have a ridge in there and that you've gotten this as flat as you can. So that you don't have any sort of tucks. Like right here, I got a little bit of a tuck in there. I need to iron that a little smoother that way so I can make sure that I have these seams as tight as they can be without any overlays or tucks where the fabric didn't get pulled tight. So I've got that done. So now what I'm going to do is work to put on the next block. I'm going to take the fabric, the paper, I'm going to turn it back on the seam line, and since I've already got that seam line kind of indentation made, I just pull this back and get my ruler, my 1/4 inch ruler, put it here to the side, and I can zoom up and cut this one 1/4 of an inch away. I do have this longer than it needs to be, so I'm going to trim this right down here, and then I will need to move my 1/4 inch ruler down a little bit to trim this completely off. Okay, so I've got one side done. Now what I'm going to do is do the other side while I'm still trimming over here so that I get the most use out of my time while I'm sitting here to this side. So I'm going to put this back against the seam line here using my ruler. Since I've already got it since I've already folded it one time, it's very easy to turn back at the proper place. I'm going to put my add a 1/4 inch ruler down, start my cut, trim away the excess so that I've got all of this trimmed away like I needed to trim it away. Okay, so that's my scrap pile right there. Everybody needs a good scrap pile. So now I've got to put the second pieces on. So I'm going to grab my piece, lay it down. This time I'm working from the back of the block. So I'm going to pin through the back of the block, make sure this is as flush as I can get it, pin through the paper so that I can keep this. I just want to make sure that I hold it in place when I transfer it from the table here to the sewing machine, because I don't want it to get out of place when I'm transferring it. So I'll cut the rest of this off that I'm not going to use and need. and then I will bring it over to the sewing machine and get ready to sew the next seam. So I'm going to, from making block 7 to 8, I will look at this and just look slightly back here to make sure that I don't have anything tucked the wrong way, that everything is in good working order. Begin to stitch. Now you can see my pin is on the other side, but I've got, since this paper is very flexible now, since I've folded it, I can reach up underneath it, pull the pin out, and continue to sew on up the row, knowing that I've got my fabric in the right exact place that I need it. So I will continue to sew up the side. As I get close to the next pin, again, I will remove it before I get to it so that it doesn't distort any of my sewing or cause my machine any problems. And I will stitch all the way outside the cutting lines so I make sure that I have a good stitch all the way to almost the edge of the paper. At that point, we flip this back. I'm just going to finger press it for the time being, and I'm going to get my other piece, put it on, pin it down. So this is working outwards in the exact same way, making each side a mirror image of the other one. So that is how you put the paper, that's how you get this on. So after I get this side sewn on, that is when I am going to come back and iron both of these at the same time, then cut them again and move on to the next color. So I can work kind of quickly through these colors this particular way. So I'm gonna sew this. So I get close to the pin. I'm gonna come up and remove my pin. Okay, now we've got our block. You can see all the paper pieced on it. So you can know when I throw it up like that I need you to slow back down again. So now what I'm going to do is pull the paper back from these stitches. As you can see, the paper is tearing off the stitches here to get it back to where I need it. So you can see that I've torn the paper off of here. Got it down to where it's at the line now to cut. So I am going to cut my 1/4" seam right there and take all of this extra off. Some of it is still sewn together, but I've got my 1/4" seam allowance on my piece here, and I am going to add my piece, the purple. Okay, got that piece. I'm gonna pin it in place so that it doesn't move on me or shift on me while I am moving it to the sewing machine. Again, I'm pinning right on top. When I get it flipped over, I'll remove the pins and I get it in place underneath my presser foot. So when I'm ready, I've got it in place. I'm gonna remove the first pin. Gonna look at it. Okay, it's all lined up. And I'm coming across to sew directly on that line. Okay, I've almost got to that second pin. And remove it. Put a couple little stray threads down here. Got those pulled back. Okay, got this sewn. Now I'm going to turn it and iron it in place. Get it pressed down really, really nice. Again, fold on the sewing line. Turn my 1/4" seam. This one's very close to being just the right amount. So now what I'm going to give you is another little hint, and this piece is lighter than what you're putting against, and it's going to fold to with this piece on top. So if you're not careful and show this purple, if you have it too far down here and some of the purple showing, then it'll bleed through the look of the fabric, so you'll be able to see it. So you want to make sure that you just put that's completely over the seam so there's no purple showing. I'm going to pin it in place. Whoop. Lost that pin. I'm going to pin it in place so when I move, I will not have it out of place. I'm going to move it over just a little bit further. It's just a little off center. Sorry, right there. It looks better to me. Then it's going to flip over and go down over this last little piece that you need. So I'm going to turn it over, get it lined up, put my presser foot down. Make sure that it looks good. Start sewing, remove my pin. Sew all the way across. Now we've got that done. And now I'm gonna iron this to where, move that right there. Okay, so now I've got my block sewn and now I'm ready for trim. So we will get that done just super quick, but this is how you sew it all together. This is what the block should look like when it's all completely done. Thanks so much and we'll see you later. Hope you have fun sewing.